Kim Jang-cheol, once an ordinary graduate student in Korea, found himself in an extraordinary predicament. Or rather, he used to be ordinary. Yesterday, in a twist of fate that felt suspiciously like a tired plot device, he had become Demon King Kratos, the infamous final boss of Paladin of Blood, a game he favored. The game's premise involved reviving an ancient, slumbering hero. Kratos, lounging on his dark throne, sighed. Delving into the game's lore seemed pointless now. Explaining it wouldn't help the immediate, pressing issue. Just then, footsteps echoed in the Grand Hall. A figure approached, addressing him formally as Lord Kratos. It was Aide Zephyros, level 15, his subordinate. Zephyros, sharp and composed in his tailored suit, reported that all preparations for the impending war were complete. Below them, the vast demon army roared, a chaotic assembly of monstrous figures eager for conflict. Leading the charge were Kratos' formidable commanders. Azurat, the prince who drinks blood, level 534, bellowed with manic intensity, promising an end to their long starvation with the spoils of this great invasion. Sergei, the cold monarch, level 531, spoke passionately of the tragedy of their barren homeland and the desperation that drove them, urging the army to carve out a lasting history. Hartok, the Archduke of Fog, level 555, commanded them to rip the humans apart and crush the elves. Baal, the Black Boulder Tyrant, level 539, added his own roar, declaring their enemies would become their sustenance. Kratos and Zephyros surveyed the fervent horde from above. Taking a breath, Kratos addressed the legions, his voice amplified, cutting through the din with commanding force. The commanders turned expectantly. He, Kratos, was issuing an order to all demon folk concerning this war. It must be stopped, he declared at all costs. His serious expression held no room for argument as he continued, stating that from this moment forward, the commanders listened, their expressions ranging from Baal's and Sergei's stoicism to Hartok's contemplative gaze and Azurat's lingering battle-crazed grin. They would cease their attack, Kratos decreed firmly, and commence farming. Silence hung heavy for a moment before erupting. The commanders, faces contorted in disbelief and fury, unleashed a collective, jagged shout, decrying the order as utterly absurd. Internally, Kratos flinched. Their rage was genuinely terrifying. The commanders stood sweating, baffled and incensed by the command. Kratos knew the alternative, though. If they started this war, the ancient hero would awaken. A system notification flashed in his memory. You have started your 20th playthrough. He visualized the hero stirring within his icy tomb, the absurdly named playable character aged Kimchi, level 9990. Initiating the invasion meant certain death at the hands of that ridiculously powerful hero. His thoughts drifted back to his past life. Kim Jang-cheol had enrolled in a farming graduate course at Korea University, dreaming of becoming a wealthy farmer. His sharp intellect quickly made him the A student, but this only led to exploitation. Professors praised his cleverness while dumping their own work, like thesis writing, onto him, claiming it was for his benefit. Another smoothly requested his help on projects, laughing unctuously, while yet another simply ordered him to plow fields like a laborer. He became nothing more than the number one slave, collapsing onto his couch in exhaustion, wondering bitterly why he toiled while others took the credit. The stress and lack of reward depleted him, driving him to fits of rage where he screamed about killing his exploiters. His only solace, his only dopamine boost, came from video games. He immersed himself in Paladin of Blood, a game renowned for its brutal difficulty and slow progression. No player had managed to clear its 19th iteration. Driven by a desperate need for achievement, Jang-cheol played obsessively, foregoing sleep, attempting playthrough after playthrough, and then finally triumph. He became the first person ever to defeat the Demon King and clear the 19th run. Delirious with exhaustion and happiness, he'd felt like the strongest person alive. He knew the 20th playthrough promised hellish difficulty, deciding he'd level up more first still basking in his victory. He checked his character, aged Kimchi, level 9990, inexplicably clad in a pink magical girl outfit. Realizing the max level was 9,999, he decided leveling was complete, chuckling dismissively about the years it must have taken. With anticipation, he faced the prompt. Will you start your 20th playthrough? He pressed yes. A blinding light surged from the screen. He recoiled, startled, wondering what was happening. The light intensified, pulling him, screaming, towards a monitor. He felt himself being sucked in, drawn into a swirling vortex. His physical form dissolved, replaced by a blue, ethereal shape, his soul. As he fell through an endless sky, he tried to rationalize, telling himself his cleverness would see him through. Observing his soul form, he reasoned he probably wouldn't die from the fall, though a sliver of doubt remained. Spotting the familiar structure of the Tower of Life far below, the truth dawned. He was inside the game. But as he descended, terror replaced realization. That wasn't the Tower of Life. It was the tomb of the Paladin. A spark of frantic hope ignited. Maybe he'd possess his max-level character, aged Kimchi, and begin a life of invincibility. His soul dove towards the slumbering figure in the ridiculous pink attire. Seeing it up close, however, gave him pause. He really didn't want to become that. Abruptly, his soul trajectory shifted violently. Where's he going now? He protested frantically as his soul shot towards the dark throne room of the Demon King. Not here. Definitely not here. Which brought him back to the present. Kratos, no. Kim Jang-cheol sighed heavily on the throne. This was driving him nuts. He cursed his own momentary hesitation. If he hadn't balked at aged Kimchi's outfit, he could have been the overpowered hero. Instead, trapped in the body of the final boss, he was an utter idiot. As he wallowed in self-pity, Ade Zephyros walked steadily down the corridor towards him again. Zephyros's eyes narrowed slightly as the generals were talking in a room. Lord Kratos, he observed inwardly, had definitely grown weaker. Zephyros continued his approach, his mind calculating. He surmised that Kratos' abrupt halt to the invasion stemmed from fear, a newfound weakness. Elsewhere, the four great demon generals conferred in secret. Baal, the hulking tyrant, proposed they unite, decapitate Kratos, and share the throne's authority, reminding them that Kratos himself had claimed the crown by killing the previous demon lord. Hartok, ever the pragmatist, injected caution. He questioned the certainty of Kratos' decline, warning that if they were wrong, a direct confrontation could result in fatal injuries or death for at least two of them. Sergei suggested that if Azurat acted as their shield, they might stand a chance. Baal bristled, interpreting this as Sergei volunteering him for death, grumbling simply about his hunger. Azurat, however, shifted the focus, demanding to know what they would do if concrete evidence of the demon lord's weakness emerged. If that proved true, Hartok conceded, then assassination would be necessary. The others, even the perpetually hungry Baal, seemed to agree, a grim consensus forming amongst them. Zephyros remained outwardly impassive, turning his attention back to his lord. He formally reported that the army's morale had plummeted following the unexpected order. Cases of infighting and cannibalism were increasing, and some demons had even deserted the lands without permission. He continued, relaying the crucial intelligence. The four great demon generals were enraged, convinced of Kratos' weakness, and actively plotting to usurp him by force. Kratos felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. The thought of facing all four generals together was terrifying. It meant certain death. He understood that any display of weakness would seal his fate. A sudden thought struck Kratos. What had become of aged Kimchi's body since he hadn't possessed it? Was it just an empty vessel? If so, perhaps charging into the human world wasn't the guaranteed suicide he feared. His contemplation was interrupted as Zephyros presented a glowing red orb, explaining it was a video recording from the tomb of the Paladin, sent by General Ogmia. The orb projected a disturbing scene. Aged Kimchi, in the ridiculous pink outfit, was being brutally attacking demons, yet seemed unfazed, almost playing with them. The demons pleaded for him to stop, screaming for help in a strangely distorted manner, even as he effortlessly crushed his attackers, asking what they were trying to do before demanding they cease. Kratos recoiled instinctively as the projection flared, the image of the hero filling the orb, accompanied by a high-pitched, simulated scream about his eyes. The final image showed aged Kimchi, splattered with gore but otherwise unharmed, looking vacant and unnerving. Kratos shuddered, wiping sweat from his brow. That display wasn't normal combat. It looked like the deranged play of a lunatic. He absolutely did not want to encounter that entity. He resolved then and there to remain in the demon realm, no matter what. His dilemma solidified. Appearing weak meant death by his generals, while charging into the human world meant a horrifying demise at the hands of aged Kimchi. He slumped, despair washing over him. Why had he come to this game world only to find misery? Happiness seemed utterly unattainable. But then, a spark of determination ignited. There was only one path forward. Resolve the food shortage issue and placate the restless demons. Standing abruptly, Kratos announced his departure. Zephyros inquired about his destination. Kratos paused, then casually replied that he was going to survey some potential farming lands. Zephyros blinked, repeating the word pardon with a hint of disbelief. Kratos, slightly irritated by the aide's tone, asked what was wrong. Zephyros adjusted his glasses, adopting a condescending air. He criticized Lord Kratos for his arrogance and lack of manners, finding the use of pardon gross and horrifying, and requested he refrain from such language. Kratos internally fumed, wondering if Zephyros was deliberately provoking him, recalling that the aide always played such a peculiar character. Zephyros, he remembered, was a mysterious figure in the game, appearing just before the final battle without explanation. This enigma, however, had made him strangely popular among players. He even had a bizarre moment where he told the paladin that the demon lord no longer wished to fight and asked him to leave. The paladin, naturally, ignored this and attacked. Zephyros was swiftly defeated, apologizing to the demon lord for his weakness, which players interpreted as either extreme loyalty or profound respect. Zephyros snapped Kratos back to the present, stating his blunder was unprecedented, having never met a demon lord who lost so much trust. Kratos silently cursed. The aide was incredibly annoying. Zephyros continued his critique, questioning Kratos' intention to farm in the demon lands and sarcastically asking if his memory was as short as a pigeon's. Kratos bristled, reminding Zephyros of his status, but the aide merely stated he would continue his observations, unfazed. Kratos wondered why Zephyros wasn't intimidated. They walked out onto the barren plains. Zephyros gestured at the desolate landscape, pointing out the dead, twisted remnants of past attempts. He reminded Kratos that both he and the former demon lord had tried farming here before, surely aware that the harsh conditions and extreme temperatures prevented anything from growing. Kratos acknowledged the area's reputation as the land of death. However, he declared confidently, with his current abilities, saving this land was possible. He admitted his personal hatred for farming, but stress survival came first. Zephyros looked on, puzzled, as Kratos knelt, scraped a handful of dry earth, and actually tasted it, his face contorting. Zephyros immediately began scribbling in his notepad, murmuring that the demon lord had become a strange beggar who eats dirt. Kratos, incensed, demanded to know what he was writing. Zephyros calmly replied he was merely performing his duty, recording the demon lord's chronicles, noting that Kratos' memory seemed to have deteriorated. Kratos seethed. Zephyros was such a pain. Spitting out the soil, Kratos confirmed its utter lack of nutrients, specifically nitrogen. He began explaining the science, his graduate school knowledge surfacing. Nitrogen, an essential element for plant growth, makes up 78% of the atmosphere, but is unusable by plants in its gaseous state due to the strong triple bonds between atoms, making chemical reactions nearly impossible. Humanity solved this via chemical engineering with the nitrogen fixation process, revolutionizing food production. Applying that here was impossible without the basic foundations. Therefore, Credos concluded they needed to utilize nature's own nitrogen fixation mechanism. Lightning, he elaborated, its high-voltage oxidizing atmospheric nitrogen into nitrite, which then mixes with rainwater and gets absorbed into the soil. And coincidentally, Demon Lord Credos' main technique involved channeling lightning. He recalled the technique Bloody Strike, which involved drawing his own blood and infusing it with lightning energy. The resulting explosion of electricity and moisture was, ironically, perfect for creating fertile soil, despite its original purpose being purely destructive in the game, often resulting in the player character's death. Credos ordered Zephyros to stand back. Steeling himself, he prepared the technique, slicing his arm open. Pain shot through him, raw and intense. He cursed inwardly. The original Credos must have been a lunatic to use such a self-damaging ability so readily. It hurt tremendously. He paused, catching his breath, slightly bewildered by the intensity. Unseen, the four generals watched from a distance, murmuring amongst themselves. He was weak. He had definitely gotten weaker. He was weaker now. Credos shrieked internally as he felt their gazes. Zephyros, adjusting his glasses, stated with certainty that Credos had weakened 100%. Credos' paranoia spiked. Zephyros was definitely an assassin, trying to provoke him into a mistake before striking. Gritting his teeth, Credos decided this pain was better than dying. He raised his bleeding arm again, forcing the words out. "Strike!" he roared, unleashing the crackling red energy. The bloody lightning arced from his hand, splattering onto the parched earth. He staggered, clutching his arm, cursing the pain. Footsteps approached. It was the generals. Hartok, Azurat, and Bal observed him. Hartok asking coolly if Demon Lord Credos felt unwell. Credos panicked. "Shit!" The dust settled slightly, revealing the four great demon generals approaching Credos, their steps heavy with intent. Azurat, the prince who drinks blood, stepped forward, a predatory glint in his eyes. He reminded Credos of the fundamental rule governing their kind. The strongest ruled as Demon Lord. Panic seized Credos, weakened from the self-inflicted wound and unable to use another skill immediately. He feared this was his end. Azurat began gathering his strength, the sheer pressure emanating from him, causing Credos' body to tremble even before the fight truly began. A cruel smile touched Azurat's lips, but he paused, questioning if Credos, in his current state, could possibly defeat all four of them combined. To Azurat's surprise, the other three generals, Hartok, Sergei, and Bal, hesitated, partially concealing themselves behind a dead tree trunk. Azurat shot them an incredulous look, wondering what they were doing. Hartok whispered back that they would observe the fight first and intervene only if victory seemed possible. Azurat cursed their treacherous nature, sweat beading on his brow. Hartok merely retorted that they were demons. Evil was their nature, wasn't it? Before Credos could react further, Zephyros abruptly interjected, citing the long-standing demon tradition. All fights were to the death, with no surrender allowed. He then declared the commencement of the duel, acting with surprising speed. Azurat, regaining his focus, urged Credos not to be scared, sneering that he would win easily now that the Demon Lord was weakened. Credos' mind raced, frantically trying to figure out a plan. He quickly assessed his physical strength. While possessing the Demon Lord body made him strong, it wasn't overwhelmingly so, certainly not enough to overpower Azurat directly. Azurat lunged, shouting his attack. Credos recognized the movement instantly from countless hours playing Paladin of Blood. It was either a thrust or a slash. Panic flared again. Dodging such a swift attack seemed impossible. Yet, almost instinctively, his body moved, twisting aside as Azurat's massive blade swept past. He was bewildered. How had he managed that? The answer came swiftly. Azurat's left foot pointed outwards, a clear telegraph from the game indicating an incoming thrust. It was the exact same motion he'd seen innumerable times on screen. Kratos dodged again as Azurat executed the predicted thrust. From behind the tree, Hartok noted Kratos' expression as he dodged, observing that he looked ready to counterattack and rip Azurat's arm off. He questioned why Azurat hadn't waited and observed longer. Kratos continued to evade Azurat's relentless attacks, a strange sense of déjà vu washing over him. Every single one of Azurat's movements perfectly mirrored his in-game patterns. He recalled his first encounter with Azurat in the game. The boss had been incredibly difficult, seemingly impossible to defeat with his speed, feints, offbeat rhythm, and wide attack range. He had died again and again and again 10 times over. It wasn't until his 128th attempt that he finally achieved victory. In subsequent playthroughs, he mastered the fight, even achieving a no-hit run. Azurat continued his furious assault, but Kratos felt a surge of confidence. Simply put, having memorized every pattern through sheer repetition, there was no way Azurat's attacks could hit him now. The observing generals, however, misinterpreted the scene. Seeing Kratos effortlessly weave through Azurat's attacks, they didn't see recognition, but mockery. Hartok remarked that Kratos seemed to be having fun, laughing at Azurat's weakness and enjoying himself. Azurat, enraged by the perceived humiliation, roared, calling Kratos a scumbag. Kratos felt a wave of relief, though he knew dodging alone wouldn't win the fight. More importantly, a crucial realization dawned. This world truly operated under the same rules as the game. Just then, a translucent blue screen materialized before him, displaying a message. Kim Jang-cheol, you have realized the basic rule of this world. Kratos blinked, recognizing the familiar system messenger interface common in webtoons. Another message followed. You have also succeeded at dodging your enemy's attacks with high concentration. Then came the reward. As a reward, a part of the game system that is used by playable characters has been unlocked. Targeting function unlocked. Kratos focused, and a green targeting reticle appeared over Azurat, just like the one used for special skills in the game. This meant he could use his skills with precision. Without hesitation, Kratos sliced his arm open again and unleashed another bloody strike, this time guided by the targeting system. The attack struck Azurat squarely, engulfing him in a crackling explosion. Sergei and Hartok flinched behind their cover. The other demons erupted in cheers, shouting Kratos' name, awestruck by the display of power. Azurat collapsed, scorched and smoking, coughing heavily. But Kratos knew it wasn't over. Azurat was still alive. Bloody Strike caused instant death in the game, but Azurat's incredible recovery ability, a trait Kratos remembered well, meant he'd regain his energy quickly. Indeed, Azurat began to stir, forcing Kratos to strike again. The generals watched, perplexed. Hartok noted that Kratos was attacking Azurat just enough to cause pain, but not kill him. Azurat twitched on the ground, seemingly incapacitated but not dead. Kratos internally debated what to do next. Suddenly, another system message appeared. You have torn off all of Azurat's clothes, and he is now naked. Kratos internally questioned the bizarre notification, wondering why the system sounded like a pervert. A new system has been unlocked. Inventory's armor removal unlocked. Kratos briefly checked the newly accessible inventory, hoping for useful armor, but found only the equipment he was already wearing. Nothing immediately useful. He needed to get rid of Azurat first. Killing him was difficult due to his recovery, but he couldn't just leave him. Then, an idea sparked. Since Azurat wasn't dead, he could still be targeted. He could keep firing bloody strikes at him. A maniacal grin spread across Kratos' face. He could infuse the ground with tons of nitrogen this way. Yes, he was the smartest. Seeing the generals still cowering, he decided to test their fear. He called out to Sergei. He ordered her to tie the naked Azurat up tightly. Sergei flushed, interpreting the command as a deliberate attempt to humiliate both her and Azurat simultaneously. Nevertheless, She complied, and soon Azurat was bound securely to the dead tree trunk, effectively becoming a lightning rod. Azurat groaned, beginning to recover. His eyes snapped open, filled with rage. He declared that Kratos had indeed gotten weaker if Bloody Strike couldn't kill him, vowing to take his head this time. Kratos announced step 2, Bloody Strike. He fired again, explaining internally that this would oxidize the nitrogen in the air into nitrite. He then turned to Hartok, ordering him to cover the entire area with fog, specifying it needed to be thick enough for water to flow. Hartok flinched, misinterpreting the command as preparation for a horrific torture method involving amplified lightning in the moisture-filled air. He shuddered at the creativity but complied, summoning a dense fog that enveloped the area, completing step 3, spread the fog. Kratos then announced step 4, strike. In repeat, he unleashed Bloody Strike after Bloody Strike, ignoring the searing pain in his arm. Zephyros watched him passively, while Ball and Sergei looked on with a mixture of fear and awe. Azurat convulsed silently on his makeshift crucifix as the lightning rained down. Kratos laughed, giddy with excitement. This was awesome. He could turn this barren land into fertile ground rich with nitrogen. He imagined bountiful harvests, the possibilities thrilling him. He continued the barrage, laughing maniacally. Blood-red lightning filled the air. Finally, he stopped, examining a handful of the treated soil. It was good. He just needed to keep infusing nitrogen this way. The next step, he mused, was improving the soil structure. He recalled his agricultural knowledge. The current loose, monovalent structured soil lacked aeration and drainage. Ideal farming required crumbly, granular structured soil, which meant the next thing he needed to create was manure. He turned to the assembled demons, a terrifying glint in his eyes, and bellowed for all of them to get him shit. The 3 remaining generals stared, splattered with stray blood and dirt, utterly horrified. After making an example of Azurat and grilling him with lightning, now Kratos wanted to smear him with excrement? The cruelty was unbelievable. Meanwhile, under a bright blue sky in the human world, aged Kimchi wandered through a sun-dappled forest. A weak voice called out, pleading for help. Peeking through the bushes, the hero saw 2 figures. One, supporting the other who seemed injured, explained they were attacked by goblins and begged for assistance, promising compensation. Aged Kimchi stepped out from the bushes, revealing his peculiar pink attire. The 2 travelers gasped, their faces with shock and fear. They resembled someone, but I could not determine who it was. Aged Kimchi tilted his head, calmly assuring them not to fear. He wasn't suspicious. His appearance, however, screamed otherwise, looking horrifyingly suspicious to the travelers. He approached, asking about the injured leg. Without waiting for an answer, he effortlessly lifted the injured man onto his back. He then politely requested the other traveler lead the way. The traveler stammered an affirmative. As they walked, the man being carried, Envoy Rivage Azrahan, remarked on aged Kimchi's surprising strength, introducing himself and his servant, Diol Frontera. Rivage then hesitantly asked who their rescuer was. Aged Kimchi paused, gazing toward the village nestled in the valley below, stating that finding that out was what he needed to do, starting from now. Back in the imposing Demon King's castle, the 3 remaining generals, Hartok, Sergei, and Ball, sat in stunned silence around a table. Hartok finally broke the tension, his voice tight with disbelief, questioning how exactly they were supposed to procure the requested material poop. Were they expected to force demons to produce it on the spot? Sergei shuddered visibly, finding the entire notion utterly crazy and disgusting. Ball stated bluntly that it had been a long time since he last ate, making the task pooping impossible for him. Sergei hastily added that she didn't engage in such activities either, prompting Ball to gruffly tell her not to discuss his bodily functions. Hartok, ever disdainful, declared that even if they could, he wouldn't supply the demon lord with his own. He proposed a more practical, albeit cruel, solution. They should simply beat up the low-ranking demons until they complied. Soon, Pathetic pleas echoed through the crude huts of the lower demon settlement, begging their superiors not to do this. One emaciated demon, surrounded by armored guards, cried out in distress, unable to perform poop under pressure and begging them to at least wait outside. A frustrated guard reported back to Hartok. The others had claimed the same inability, yielding no results. Hartok demanded to know what was taking so long. Approaching the distressed demon, Hartok asked if he truly couldn't provide anything, no matter how hard he tried. The demon, weakened by starvation, pleaded with Lord Hartok, explaining he hadn't eaten and couldn't produce anything. Hartok abruptly seized the demon by the throat, his patience clearly exhausted. Before he could inflict harm, Ball intervened, suggesting Hartok's idea was great. Dark energy swirled around Hartok's hand as the starving demon screamed in terror. Ball grabbed Hartok's arm, stopping him. Hartok glared, demanding to know what Ball wanted. Ball pointed out the flaw in Hartok's method. Piercing the demon's stomach would kill him, yielding no manure. They needed the demons to defecate more, not die, so they could collect a larger quantity. Hartok momentarily looked surprised, then conceded with a smirk that Bale's point was surprisingly smart, especially coming from him. A sinister glint entered Hartok's eyes as he suggested that feeding the demons Bale's meat might get them started. Ball tensed, hostility flaring between the two generals. The starving demon began to sweat nervously as Hartok and Ball squared off, ready to fight. Suddenly, Kratos' voice cut through the tension, demanding to know what they were doing. His intervention stopped the fight before it began, leaving the two generals momentarily stunned. Kratos addressed them, explaining that feces without nutritional value were useless. They needed proper manure. Zephyros, ever present, inquired about the definition of manure. Kratos clarified it was the nutrient-providing ingredient for the fields. He elaborated that manure was typically made from components like wooden ashes, weeds, soil, eggshells, and chicken feces. He noted that for ashes and weeds, they could utilize the abandoned structures they'd seen earlier. The real problem lay in sourcing eggshells and chicken feces in their barren land. Then, an idea struck him. He commanded Zephyros to bring the map of their land. Zephyros promptly produced the map, spreading it out. Kratos examined it closely, confirming it was identical to the one in the game. This meant, he deduced, pointing to a specific coastal area dotted with sharp rock pillars jutting from the sea, that he should find his target there, the habitat of the demon seagulls. He explained that in the game, these seagulls were plentiful, suggesting they ingested nutrients from the human lands before returning to these cliffs to lay eggs and defecate, making it the perfect location to gather the needed ingredients. Zephyros, catching on quickly, asked if His Majesty intended to collect the poop of demon seagulls. Kratos acknowledged his aide's quick thinking. Zephyros, however, warned that the place was known as the cliff from which one cannot return. It offered no stable holds, and falling meant being swept away by the rough waves below. Kratos stated he knew that much, recalling that the location wasn't systematically reachable for players in the game. But, he declared with determination, he could climb it. They soon stood at the base of the treacherous cliffs, waves crashing against the sheer rock faces where countless demon seagulls circled above. The generals watched Kratos, wondering what he was thinking. Zephyros added that many demons had tried hunting the seagulls there before, only to fall prey to the waves. Kratos slung a large, empty bag over his shoulder, explaining he would climb to the top and throw down the bag filled with feces and eggshells, instructing them to catch it. A confident, almost manic grin spread across his face as he declared that if this succeeded, everyone would be well fed. Ball merely grunted, unconvinced, while the plight of the starving lower demons remained a grim backdrop. Kratos approached the cliff face, waves crashing nearby. He remembered this climb from the game, possibly his 13th playthrough. He had tried everything to get up there, attempting hundreds of times and dying repeatedly in the process. Finding a specific point on the cliff, he prepared himself, watched intently by Zephyros and the generals. He recalled that, in the end, he had succeeded by abusing a glitch. He jammed his hand into a barely perceptible seam in the rock face, causing Zephyros and Ball to gasp in surprise. He accessed his equipment inventory and commanded it to unequip everything. His armor vanished, leaving him completely naked, much to the shock and confusion of his audience. His bare body then seemed to pass partially into the solid rock, eliciting further astonishment. He muttered that he needed to roll his body. Sergei gasped and covered her eyes, exclaiming, "Oh my, no!" He then commanded the system to equip all. Instantly, his armor reappeared, but materialized outside the rock face, leaving his body parts, limbs, torso, head, still phased inside. Sergei peeked through her fingers, blushing furiously. Kratos then repeated the command, roll his body and unequip all. His naked body parts reappeared outside the rock, further up the cliff, while the armor remained briefly below before vanishing. He continued this bizarre process, essentially climbing by exploiting the glitch, unequipping and re-equipping to shift his position incrementally up the cliff face, until he finally reached the summit. Re-equipping his armor one last time, he stood triumphantly on the cliff top, declaring it done. He mused that combining the shared game system, the inventory, and this supposedly unreachable map edge made the impossible climb achievable. Below, Ball announced that since His Majesty promised to feed them all, he would go up and help. Zephyros quickly objected, reminding him of the danger, and Kratos yelled that he couldn't make it. Ignoring them, Ball declared his intention to follow His Majesty and took a running leap towards the cliff face. Kratos screamed in exasperation, asking what the hell Ball thought he was doing. Ball scrambled for purchase on the rock, but quickly lost his grip, falling towards the churning waves below. Reacting instantly, Kratos plunged his hand back into the rock face, phasing it through, and grabbed Bale's wrist just in time. Dangling from the cliff, Kratos strained against Bale's immense weight, feeling like his arm was about to be ripped off. He grunted, suddenly questioning his actions. Why was he saving Ball, one of the generals who posed a threat? Wouldn't it be better to let him fall? Ball looked up, confused, but understanding dawned in his eyes as Kratos told him he had no reason to help. Kratos grit his teeth, sweat pouring down his face, a memory surfacing. A desperate junior from his university days, begging Jianxiol for help intervening with a professor who was exploiting him, preventing him from submitting his essay to keep him as a slave. The junior pleaded for Jianxiol to talk to the professor, believing the professor liked Jianxiol and might listen. He remembered the junior following him around. But Jianxiol, afraid of falling out of favor himself, had refused, coldly stating it was the junior's own business. Maybe, just maybe, he could have helped that guy. If he had just tried a little more, squeezed out everything he had, tried his absolute best, maybe the face in his memory would be smiling instead of crying. With a primal roar, Kratos heaved, the sound of straining muscle and potentially tearing ligaments audible. He flung Ball upwards onto the cliff top, losing his own grip in the process and tumbling backward off the edge. Ball landed hard with a cook, groaning in pain. He looked over the edge just in time to see Kratos barely catch himself, clinging precariously. Ball stared, realizing His Majesty had saved him at the cost of injuring himself, despite having no obligation to do so. He couldn't understand why. Kratos hauled himself back up, clutching his throbbing arm. He stated, his voice strained, that this physical pain hurt less than the regret of abandoning someone. Tears welled up in Bale's eyes as he stared at his demon lord. Kratos looked away, thinking of his past failure, feeling this was what he should have done then. He quietly apologized to the memory of his junior. A system notification flashed again. Even in a state where you have not fully adapted to the body of the demon King Kratos, you poured all of your strength. As a result, you have earned the sincere gratitude of Ball, one of the 4 demon generals. Kratos glanced at Ball, wondering just how grateful he looked. Another message appeared. In honor of your achievement, A system is established where providing your army with a sense of abundant happiness earns you a great amount of points. A great amount, huh? Credos mused. Happy point, HP, accumulation system open. Credo stared at the happy point notification, his brow furrowed. He vaguely recognized the concept, wondering if it was like some loyalty program where he could get a discount on ice cream. Though the absurdity of finding ice cream in this demon-infested world quickly occurred to him, the system promptly shattered his fleeting hope, bluntly stating no game world would sell ice cream. Credos jumped, startled that the blue window seemed to directly respond to his thoughts. It wasn't just a notification system. He could apparently converse with it. The system elaborated on the new mechanic. For each soldier in his army who felt happy from a full stomach, he would gain 1 happy point. These points, it explained, could be used to purchase stats. Another window displayed his current limitations. He was only able to access 20% of Demon Lord Credos' innate power across stamina, mental strength, dexterity, and magic power. The goal was to use HP to increase these stats incrementally by 10% until he reached 100%. Intrigued, Credos decided to test it, attempting to purchase a 10% boost to stamina. The system immediately displayed the cost, 50 happy points. His current balance showed a discouraging 0. He clicked his tongue in annoyance. That was expensive. Another notification added that HP could also enhance skills. His only current skill, Bloody Strike LV.1, required a hefty 250 HP to level up. He clearly couldn't afford anything yet. Still, a path forward emerged. If he could successfully implement his farming plan and feed his starving demon populace, he could gather a significant amount of HP. This would allow him to become stronger, increasing his chances of survival against the inevitable threats. He glanced at Ball, who was still looking at him with awe and perhaps fear. The thought crossed Credos' mind that being genuinely thanked by someone, well, that could actually feel pretty good. This realization brought a faint, almost sinister smile to his lips, which Ball immediately misinterpreted. The large general shuddered internally, convinced Credos' expression promised retribution if he disobeyed, reinforcing his belief that the Demon Lord was terrifyingly mean and hadn't saved him out of simple kindness. Shaking off the momentary reflection, Credos called down to the generals gathered at the base of the cliff. Hoisting a massive, discarded demon seagull eggshell now filled with guano, he announced he was throwing it down and ordered them to catch it. Zephyros, Hartok, and Sergei stared upwards, aghast. Credos tossed the foul payload over the edge. It splattered across the 3 demons below, coating them in a vile, rainbow-sheened mixture bird poop. Zephyros grimaced, muttering that he couldn't take this anymore. Credos, ignoring their disgust, declared with renewed vigor that they would give farming their all. He outlined the first step in manure preparation, mixing the collected seagull guano, crushed eggshells, burned ashes from the abandoned village, and preparing the soil itself. The crucial next step was grinding all the ingredients together thoroughly. He turned to Sergei, ordering her to crush and grind the mixture, pointing out her multiple arms were suited for the task. Sergei recoiled, indignant at the command. Her eyes flashed as she declared herself the cold monarch, Sergei, manifesting her numerous, gleaming blades. Her arms, she spat, were not meant for mixing excrement. Credos stared back, unimpressed by her outburst. He calmly suggested an easier task, gesturing towards the still-bound Azurat. Sergei merely had to stand still over there, he implied menacingly. The threat was clear. Sergei immediately relented, furiously using her blades to grind and mix the manure components at high speed. She mentally noted how hot-tempered everyone was, reminding herself not to let her guard down. Credos felt a surge of resolve. He was the Demon Lord, after all. He would push forward with guts and force. He announced the second step, adding water. He ordered Hartok to fill the air with fog again. Hartok threw his hands up, protesting that the moisture would only intensify the unbearable stench. Credos simply gestured silently towards Azurat once more. Hartok instantly complied, conjuring a thick, swirling fog that saturated the air and the manure pile. Ball inspected the mixture, confirming it had softened considerably after being soaked, just as Credos had said. Credos then outlined the third step, placing the processed manure in a dry place and covering it with a blanket made of seagull feathers to aid decomposition. However, he acknowledged a significant problem. Even with the generals working, making even a small amount of manure was incredibly time-consuming. To fertilize the vast expanse of barren land around the castle, he concluded he had no choice but to mobilize the entire demon population for this task. Something about this decision bothered him, a flicker of unease, but he pushed it aside. It had to be done now. He would use the full authority of the Demon Lord. Night fell over the jagged mountains. In the squalid lower demon settlement, inside a dilapidated hut, a gaunt demon father sat wearily beside his young daughter, Flute, who lay weakly in bed. He asked her what was wrong. Flute, pale and listless, pleaded with him to eat her so he could survive. Her father recoiled, angrily telling her never to say such things. Tears welled in Flute's eyes as she whimpered that she missed her mother. Her father looked away, his face etched with grief and helplessness. A flashback, the monstrous roar of a starving demon echoed, driven mad by hunger. Flute gasped in terror as a massive fist punched through the flimsy wall, reaching for her. Her mother tried futilely to intervene. Flute stared in horror, seeing a fleeting image of her mother as the monstrous demon loomed closer. Her father slumped, whispering what reason he would have to live on if Flute was gone. Suddenly, he looked up, startled. Credos, flanked by Ball and Zephyros, stood in the doorway. The father stammered, recognizing the demon lord. Credos noted the rampaging demon still had the strength to shout and ordered his subordinates to take him. The father cried out, begging them not to leave Flute alone, terrified she would be eaten by other demons. As he was dragged away, Credos asked Zephyros for a head count of the demons gathered for labor. Zephyros reported 20, with 30 more needed. Credos then turned his gaze towards the small, terrified girl left behind. Flute cried out, shrinking back. A memory flashed through Credos' mind. Jiangxiol, playing the game, his hero character poised to strike down this very same girl demon. He saw his own hand gripping the controller, the paladin raising his sword. He heard the girl's in-game cry. Now, facing the real Flute, his expression was unreadable. He made a new decree, his voice ringing with authority. All illegal acts of cannibalism were forbidden. He instructed Zephyros to gather the remaining demons. Everyone was to start making manure immediately. He declared that a tyranny of this level was acceptable to achieve his goals, for the role of a leader was to bear sacrifices. Soon, the lower demons were put to work, grinding materials under guard. One demon, Dyrok, complained about the ridiculousness of farming, questioning the wasted effort. Another hushed him, warning him about the demon lord's wrath. Dyrok argued they were likely to die anyway, and even if the land became fertile, they had nothing to plant. Credos materialized behind them, asking if they were curious about what would be planted. Dyrok froze in fear. Credos ordered him to follow. He led the demon to where he recalled seeing a small, purple flower near the dead tree trunk earlier. He pointed to the resilient flower, stating that this could be planted. Dyrok looked dubious. Credos confirmed they would plant the roots, adding that Ball and a farming squad had already dug up several specimens. Dyrok vehemently protested, insisting the roots were poisonous and would cause extreme pain or even death if consumed. Credos plucked the plant, revealing small tubers attached to the roots. He countered that there was nothing else to eat anyway, and the experiment testing its edibility should be concluding right about now. Dyrok questioned the mention of an experiment. Credos stated calmly, a cold glint in his eyes, that right about now, Dyrok's daughter should be eating the root. Horror dawned on Dyrok's face. He screamed, "No," and sprinted back towards the settlement, frantically yelling for Flute not to eat it. Ball and Zephyros seemed momentarily confused. Dyrok stopped, breathless and panicked. Back in the hut, Flute was happily munching on cooked pieces of the root. She told her father that even though she ate it, she felt no pain, only satisfyingly full. Dyrok stared, dumbfounded, asking if she was truly all right. Flute nodded cheerfully, explaining that Lord Zephyros and Lord Ball had also fed her the same thing yesterday, and she felt perfectly fine. Kratos appeared beside Dyrok, asking if he believed him now. He explained that long ago, humans had also managed to cultivate a poisonous plant, making it edible through careful cultivation, resolving their own hunger issues. That plant, he revealed with a slight, knowing smile, was known as the potato. Flute looked up at Kratos, expressing disbelief that the demon lord would show such kindness to a lowly demon like her. She thanked him sincerely. A system notification chimed. A part of her demon army feels happy from eating, followed by, "You have received happy point for the first time." Another window displayed +1 happy points, bringing his total to 1. Kratos observed the notification and Flute's grateful smile, but his own expression hardened into an intense glare. He juxtaposed the memory of the ravenous, monstrous demon with Flute's current contentment. He internally reasoned that being the demon lord didn't obligate him to maintain a perpetually serious demeanor. He then fixed Flute with a terrifyingly wide, sharp-toothed grin, telling a brat like her to simply eat her fill and grow up tall. Observing this exchange, Ball and Zephyros exchanged worried glances, concluding that their demon lord was truly evil, likely just fattening the child up to eat her later. A final note clarified the kind, gentle expression Kim Jangcheol intended to convey, starkly contrasting with the demonic visage he actually presented. Kratos' agricultural revolution took place in the deepest part of the demon lord's vast territory, a region known as Chavandantor. This desolate area was the innermost of 5 concentric zones dividing the land. The climate was brutally harsh, reminiscent of the Andean highlands, freezing cold at night and scorching hot during the day under a relentless sun. Kratos explained the parallel to his dubious audience. In Earth's past, inhabitants of the Andes, facing starvation, resorted to eating poisonous wild potatoes. When questioned if they died, Kratos scoffed, reminding them of human ingenuity, their ability to turn even dangerous things like pufferfish edible with proper preparation. The process began. Dyrok reported that the harvested poisonous roots were laid out across the barren ground. Kratos then commanded Ball to use his Meteor Stomp ability to crush them. The massive general leaped high into the air, slamming down with immense force, pulverizing the roots beneath his feet. Kratos elaborated on the method, adapted from the traditional Andean technique for making chino. The roots were frozen solid during the 5 coldest nights, then trampled after thawing in the daytime sun. This repeated freezing, melting, and stomping caused the poison within the tubers to leak out and evaporate. After several repetitions, the resulting matter was dried, stored, and then lightly cooked, transforming the once deadly wild potatoes into edible, preserved chino. Kratos instructed Zephyros to gather the farming squad responsible for making manure. It was time for snacks, he announced with a disturbingly eager grin. He presented the cooked chino to the assembled, emaciated demons, cautioning them to take only 2 each due to the limited initial supply. Zephyros pointed out the obvious. This small amount was far from sufficient to feed the entire demon army. Kratos acknowledged this, declaring their objective was now to plant the remaining potatoes and cultivate them, aiming to increase the yield 1,000-fold. The farming demons hesitated, murmuring fearfully. One recalled a relative dying after eating the raw poisonous root. Dyrok, however, stepped forward, reminding them that the demon lord had altered it, citing his own daughter Flute as proof of its safety now. He urged them to trust the demon lord, though he couldn't help but point out Kratos' intimidating expression. That terrifying face leered at them, almost singing for them to eat quickly, as if anticipating their agonizing deaths. Despite their fear, one demon hesitantly took a bite. After a tense moment, tears streamed down his face as he roared, "Long live the Demon Lord." Seeing him unharmed, the rest of the squad quickly devoured their portions, looking amongst themselves in disbelief. The Demon Lord had actually given them edible food. A wave of relief and gratitude washed over them, erupting into spontaneous chants of credos. Yes, credos. Credos watched, finding the chant slightly grating and making a mental note to change it later. Zephyros observed the scene, noting Credos' unwavering confidence and wondering if he might genuinely end the chronic starvation plaguing their land. Just then, system notifications popped up. A part of your demon army feels happy from eating, followed by plus 50 happy points, bringing Credos' total to 51. Oh, Credos thought, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his features. That was a decent amount of points, enough to strengthen himself somewhat. He considered his options: stamina, mental strength, physical strength, dexterity, or magic power, but ultimately decided to wait and accumulate more points before committing. He turned to Zephyros, instructing him to organize the workforce, splitting them into a manure production squad and a potato gathering squad. Zephyros was tasked with spreading the word throughout the villages. Edible food could now be grown, and any demon who helped dig up wild potatoes would receive food vouchers exchangeable for the precious chino. Credos grudgingly admitted that despite Zephyros' annoying tendencies, he was proving quite helpful. The incentive worked wonders. Demons enthusiastically began scouring the land for wild potatoes. The operation divided its focus. One group producing chino, the other diligently making manure under Sergei and Hartok's likely disgusted supervision. Meanwhile, Azurat's ordeal continued. Still bound to the repurposed lightning rod, he was repositioned slightly by laborers. Credos approached, preparing to unleash another bloody strike, stating he needed to work hard to produce nitrogen. Soon after, Credos decided enough manure had been accumulated, and it was time for the next step. The vastness of the territory posed a challenge. Spreading the manure evenly by hand would be impossible. Azurat, hanging limply, groaned, begging Credos to just kill him already. Credos ignored him, observing how resilient great demon generals were, functioning even while starving. He pondered if there was truly no other way to spread the manure efficiently besides waiting for more manpower. Later, seated on his throne, Credos questioned Zephyros about his request for reinforcements from the Star Masters. Zephyros confirmed messages had been dispatched to the 4 Star Masters governing the surrounding areas, ordering them to cease hostilities and provide troops for farming. However, no replies had yet been received. Credos worried that the messengers might have succumbed to hunger or that the current workforce was simply too small for the monumental task of spreading manure across the entire domain. Unbeknownst to them, in the desolate First Star area known as the Cliff of the Dead, a spectral, cloaked scout reported to a towering, ethereal figure. The scout confirmed that Demon Lord Credos had indeed begun farming and had successfully created edible food. The figure, First Star Master Saruthal, Father of the Dead, sneered, recognizing Credos' actions as born of fear of him. Saruthal revealed his power grew stronger as more demons died. By halting the war and alleviating starvation, Credos was directly weakening him. Saruthal confirmed with his skull-masked aide, Fikamer, that the messengers sent to the other Star Masters had been intercepted. The other regional lords remained ignorant of the changed circumstances. Saruthal declared that the demons must starve, for only their deaths would feed his power and his army. Therefore, he concluded, he would kill Credos and claim the Demon Lord title for himself. He addressed Fikamer directly, commanding him to destroy all of Credos' farming efforts utterly. Fikamer's glowing eyes narrowed in acknowledgement. Later, under a pale moon, Fikamer materialized near the site where Azurat was suspended. He commented on Credos' viciousness, turning Azurat into a living corpse as an example. He offered Azurat false comfort, stating that Lord Saruthal admired aggression and would take Azurat in once Credos was dead. Fikamer then summoned legions of swirling, ghostly wraiths, ordering them to destroy the nascent farmland, to ruin the soil so completely that it could never be used again. The spectral horde surged forth. Spotting the carefully prepared piles of manure, Fikamer cackled, ordering the wraiths to scatter it across the land, mixing it deep into the ground, burying it everywhere until not a single lump remained visible, ensuring Credos couldn't simply regather it. He laughed maniacally at the sabotage. Azurat watched the spectral destruction in silence. A flashback with Credos, Zephyros reported the next problem. The prepared manure needed to be finely ground and mixed into the soil, a labor-intensive task beyond the capability of the exhausted farming squad. As Fikamer's wraiths completed their destructive work unseen, the aide gloated from afar, declaring it was over for Credos. High above, Azurat could only wonder what insidious goal the spectral demons were trying to achieve.